I am blind. Returning to the apartment late at night, thinking my roommate was already asleep, I groped my way back to my room to rest. The next day, the place was swarming with police. My roommate had been murdered the night before. They told me that on the living room wall someone had written a line of bloody characters with the deceased's blood. Lucky I'm blind, right? I suffer from a congenital eye disease. In common parlance, I'm a blind man. I wasn't born completely blind. My sight began to fail after I started middle school. From clear vision, it gradually blurred. Then beyond 10 or so meters, people and dogs became indistinguishable, and finally to the present state where I can't see anything at all. The whole process took less than half a year. Fortunately, I've now adapted to a life without light, found a job that keeps me, and I'm sharing a 2-bedroom apartment in a building not far from the company with some coworkers. I like quiet and originally wanted to live alone, but I couldn't argue with my family's insistence. They were adamant that I rent with someone reliable, so that if anything happened to me, there would at least be someone around to help. Wayne was a decent roommate. He paid the rent promptly and caused few problems, but whether he could be called a reliable person was another matter. For one thing, he was a womanizer. Even though he had a long-distance girlfriend, he still brought home different companions every few days, loved drinking and bragging. For example, that day he told me early on that he would invite several close colleagues over that evening to drink, and he invited me to join. I politely declined. I knew how loud they could get when they drank together. My hearing is keener as a blind person, and I don't like commotion, so I told him I'd go out for a walk as usual and come back only after the others had left. I leaned on my white cane, taking my usual walk by the park lake. At exactly 11 that night, the alarm I had set on my phone went off. Whenever Wayne invited friends over to drink, I always came back at about this time. It takes roughly 20 minutes to walk from the park back to the complex, just in time to catch people as they're leaving so I can exchange a few words. It neither wastes too much time nor makes it look like I'm completely avoiding them. The rent here is cheap. It's an old, shabby building with no elevator. I counted the steps of the staircase, walked up to the 3rd floor, and about 33 paces to the left would place me right in front of her door. Inside, it was utterly silent. It was somewhat unexpected. I hadn't thought they'd finished so early. I fumbled for the key, feeling the cold metal handle in the dark, and meant to reach down to the keyhole. But to my surprise, the door swung open at once. I murmured to myself, Wayne must have drunk a lot to forget to lock the door. Squeak! The door swung open on cue. A blast of icy draft swept through the hall and chilled my neck. I couldn't help but shiver. The balcony door was broken and hadn't been fixed. The air inside was thick with alcohol, tobacco, sweat, and the quiet that follows revelry, all blown in by the night breeze. I'm back. You finished so early today, I said as I came in and closed the door behind me. Another creak. The room was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. I felt puzzled. Wayne. I held my breath for a few seconds, but no one answered. Only the drip, drip of water answered me. I made a mental note to get the kitchen faucet fixed. Had the kid gone out or already gone to bed? I couldn't say. I hesitated about deadbolting the front door. I didn't want him waking me up to open it when I was sleeping soundly. Then, besides my own breathing, I heard another person's. Heavy, steady, and rhythmic. Though very faint, my hearing was keen. The breathing sounded like it was coming from Wayne's bedroom. Wayne, are you asleep? Only faint, intermittent breaths answered me in the dark. I relaxed. It seemed the kid had drunk too much and fallen asleep. Believing he had gone back to his room to rest, I stopped calling for him. I returned to my own room, washed up, and was about to go to sleep when I got a call from a colleague at the company. Hello, I'm home already. Wayne? I don't know. He went to his room to sleep before I got back. I haven't talked to him. If it's about work, come see him tomorrow. Okay, you get some rest too. Good night. After hanging up, I didn't take long to fall asleep. Tired from the day, I slept deeply that night, until the next morning a furious pounding on the door woke me. Who is it? I was drowsy and bleary-eyed, groped to the door, and opened the bedroom door. A strange scent hit me in the face. A blind person is always especially sensitive to the scents people carry. Only then did I realize there were many people outside the door talking, walking, and rummaging through things. They all seemed to be gathered in the living room. Police, the stranger said in a rough voice. I heard the rustle of fabric. I guessed he was showing me his badge. Police, I repeated in surprise. What are you doing in my house? Someone called it in. Who are you? What are you doing here? I live here. This is the house I rent. Then I gave my name. The rustle. He was writing down what I said. You've been all night. Maybe noticing the unfocused look in my eyes. The officer who had been speaking froze for a few seconds. Are you blind? Realizing that sounded a bit rude, he cleared his throat. Right, I can't see. Who called the police? What's going on? I was very puzzled, but the person across from me didn't speak. I wondered if he was waving his hand in front of my eyes to see if I was really blind. That person is fine. We checked with nearby neighbors. He's a blind man. A voice crossed over the shoulder of the man in front of me and reached my ear. It sounded like his colleague. I felt utterly bewildered and couldn't help but shout loudly. What on earth is going on? Footsteps. Then a new breath arrived with the sound of leather shoes on the floor. It stopped in front of me, the same voice that had called out before. Judging by the pitch, he was a bit shorter than the officer from before. The voice was young, yet carried an authority that was hard to resist. Are you sharing this place with anyone else? I stared blankly and nodded. What's your roommate's name? Wayne. Why do you ask? A thought pushed into my mind. Could it be that Wayne? Wayne's dead. I sucked in a sharp breath. My mind went blank in an instant. I felt the strength drain from my legs, and the room spun. The young officer continued. Wayne's girlfriend called him a dozen times this morning and couldn't reach him. The delivery person who'd been asked to drop something off used the spare key under the mat to open the door from outside. The moment it was opened, he was terrified and immediately called the police. When we and the medics arrived, we found him in his bedroom. Unfortunately, your roommate had already stopped breathing. From the scene, we have ample reason to suspect foul play. I could hardly hear the latter half of the officer's words. Wayne is dead? No. To be precise, he was murdered? Right here? In our apartment? A chill ran up my spine. Right next door to me? For a moment, I lost the ability to think rationally and asked dumbly. How'd he die? He was stabbed once in the chest and died instantly. But no murder weapon was found at the scene. One of the kitchen knives is missing from the knife rack. Those are the knives I just bought. The two officers exchanged a glance. It seemed they had identified the murder weapon. Are you going to arrest me? According to procedure, we need you to cooperate with the investigation. Able-bodied people always feel a natural sympathy toward the disabled. Perhaps it was out of pity for me that the young officer's tone softened. But you don't need to worry. You're no longer a suspect. I was stunned. At that moment, something suddenly occurred to me. The young officer said Wayne died in the bedroom, and his bedroom door did not face the front door. So why was the delivery guy so terrified when he opened the door? What on earth did he see? The tall officer sighed and patted my shoulder. You're really lucky. A blessing in disguise, as they say. I didn't understand. The young officer took up the thread. The killer wrote something on the living room wall. What? Don't faint when I tell you. I took a deep breath, trying to steel myself. Go on. There was a line on the wall that looked written in blood. Lucky you're blind, right? His voice sounded unusually long in the buzz of my ears. Which is to say, when you came home last night, you ran right into the killer. He might have been standing in a corner, quietly watching your every move. It took me a long time to recover from the shock and fear. The young Officer Lin, who had just joined the force, was in charge of taking my statement. Let's find someplace a bit quieter. Officer Lin patted my shoulder and handed my cane into my hand. I listened to the gossiping residents clustered 3 layers deep beyond the police tape and agreed with Officer Lin inwardly. It was indeed a bit too noisy here. Oh, scary, an elderly auntie exclaimed, dramatically clutching her chest. The frightener is still lingering here, not leaving. Who died? Who died? The voice sounded like a troublemaking blonde street punk. Not me. I'm very sorry. I heard the murderer is some perverted serial killer. An old man with a trembling voice. Though clearly advanced in years, he grew especially spry when speaking about the deranged serial killer. How do you know that? The auntie asked in surprise. A street tough butted in and said, Didn't you hear? The killer actually wrote something on the wall with blood. Jesus, cut it out. It's true. I heard it from the delivery guy who reported it. What did he write? Afraid and curious at once. The old man's voice dropped, and a few seconds later the crowd gasped. When I followed Officer Lin through the police tape, the crowd erupted in another round of exclamations. I heard them whispering among themselves. Could he be? Of course. Where else around here is there a second blind person? I'm going, this is so thrilling. Excited shivers ran through the whole crowd like electric currents. Suddenly someone grabbed my arm. Interview time. How does it feel to be in the same room with a murderer? Thrilling or what? With someone to speak up, everyone else crowded around, chattering. What did you feel at the time? Are you scared to death now? Ha ha. You're not in cahoots with the killer, are you? Someone that big entered the house and you didn't notice? I think you're the murderer. Stop pretending. Watch that little life of yours. Might get killed to silence you. It was only with Officer Lin's intervention that I finally managed to escape the whirlpool of neighborhood gossip. Even if I couldn't see them, I could feel their eyes glued to my back. A morning that had already been hit by a string of blows left me feeling increasingly parched and drained of strength as I slipped away from the crowd. Officer Lin found a nearby coffee shop. One espresso, please. What would you like? Just plain water. I replied weakly. Normal people get excited when they come across a murder case. Of course, as long as it doesn't involve them. I nodded, my face pale. Officer Lin offered me a few words of comfort, then formally began the questioning. How did you and the deceased, Wayne, get to know each other? We worked at the same company. What company? I gave the company's name, adding, a game company. He looked at me suspiciously. I knew what he was thinking. A blind man working at a game company? I explained that I helped them test accessibility mode optimizations, the assistive technologies developed for players like me who have no sight, such as audio cues and haptic feedback. But I knew that was just a pretext to get me in. There were tax incentives locally for businesses that employed people with disabilities. That, I suspected, was the real reason I was hired. The work I actually do at the company is about the same as a mascot, mostly gossiping and chatting with different people every day. Officer Lin looked partly puzzled and partly understanding. What does Wayne do? He writes code. He changed the subject and asked me to tell him what I remembered from last night. So I told him the truth. When we left work, Wayne told me he was going to invite a few close coworkers over tonight to drink and brag, and asked if I wanted to join. I politely declined and decided to take a walk in a nearby park, planning to return only when they were winding down. Do you know who is coming to drink? Gary, Jake, Victor, and Charlie and Dylan. I told Officer Lin their names one by one. Continue. I wandered around outside for a bit. When I got back home, it was about 11:20, at most not later than 11:30. Are you sure? I nodded and told him about setting the alarm on my phone and how long it took to walk home from the park. Officer Lin was very thorough and had me describe exactly which spot in the park I had walked from. I figured they'd verify the time required later. When I got home, was it? I hesitated greatly. Officer Lin guessed what I wanted to say and nodded. I'm afraid Wayne has met with foul play, and the killer hasn't left the scene yet. The coroner estimated the time of death between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. It now appears very likely to have been around 11:20, which greatly narrows the scope of the investigation. Could the murderer be one of those 5 people with Gary? I found it hard to believe. After all, they were colleagues who spent day and night together. According to the neighbor's description, the 5 of them left at about 10:30. We can't rule out the possibility that one of them returned to commit the crime. But my door wasn't locked when I came home. Anyone could have gotten in and killed Wayne, right? There are no signs of struggle at the scene, and no property was reported missing. We suspect it's very likely a revenge attack by someone the victim knew, but we will investigate every possibility. I thought for a moment and felt Officer Lin made a fair point. At that moment, the waiter brought our drinks. Officer Lin picked up 2 sugar cubes and dropped them into his cup, then pushed my plain cup of water toward me. Who knew about the spare key hidden under the carpet? Friends close to Wayne should all know. Who exactly knows and who doesn't, I can't say. We rented an old apartment near the company, and Wayne's close coworkers would often come by after work to drink with him. Sometimes when Wayne worked late, They'd use the spare key to let themselves in and then put it back under the rug. Of the 5 people you mentioned, did any of them have a grudge against Wayne? Dylan, whose real name is Who Do You On? I blurted out without thinking. He always thought Wayne had stolen his chance for promotion and a raise. That was 2 months ago. Privately, Dylan had complained to me about it a few times. They still drank together while harboring grudges? I'm not sure either. Maybe they got along. What is it? Officer Lynn paused his notes and looked at me. Why didn't you suspect me? Of course I don't want to be suspected, but I just find it a bit strange. We of course also considered that you might have killed the person, then written those words on the wall to make it look like there had been a third person in the room when you returned. The killer wrapped his fingers in a towel from Wayne's bedroom to get blood on them, and deliberately wrote in a lopsided, messy way to hide the handwriting. Even if I can't see, as long as I'm familiar with the layout of the room, I can still do it. Why is that? Because the scene was too tidy. Officer Lynn sat up straight, his tone growing very serious, which made me involuntarily tense. There are no signs of a struggle at the scene. Wayne was killed in his sleep by a single stab. The killer would have had to aim before delivering the blow. He took the murder weapon and carefully cleaned up the scene. So carefully we found no usable fingerprints. That requires someone clear-headed and whose eyes can see. Similarly, Gary's suspicion is also ruled out. Why? According to other statements, Gary drank the most last night, plastered, and was incoherent when put into the taxi. If he had come back to kill Wayne, the scene wouldn't have been cleaned up so thoroughly. My colleague contacted that taxi driver and got the same testimony. Then it's among the other 4. 3 people. Charlie has a solid alibi. After leaving Wayne's house, he stopped at a roadside barbecue stall and ordered several skewers. The owner remembers him well. He stayed until nearly midnight before leaving, so he had no time to commit the crime. The other 3 men couldn't help but spring to mind. In my imagination, Jake's eyes are shrewd, Victor's face all coarse flesh, and Dylan wears a sly grin. Which one of them, after all, stood at last night's murder scene holding a knife and watching me in silence? 2 red points of light emerged from the darkness, a blurred human silhouette, a stifled breath. I remember something else. I swallowed and wanted a sip of water to moisten my lips, but my throat was dry and hoarse, as usual. Officer, were there any liquids dripping vertically onto the floor at the scene, or any other similar traces? Do you mean drip-like bloodstains? Yes, right at the victim's bedroom door. The medical examiner thinks the killer paused at the doorway for a few seconds, holding the weapon, and blood dripped from it. Officer Lynn was somewhat surprised. How did you know? I forced a bitter smile. How did I know? Because I heard it last night. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the sound of blood dripping. Officer Lynn asked me some other questions. I answered them truthfully. They finished the forensic inspection of the apartment later that afternoon. Wayne's bedroom and part of the living room were cordoned off with police tape. No one was allowed inside. I was permitted to go home to grab some commonly used clothes. I planned to get a hotel room for the time being. Do you need my help? Officer Lynn asked me as he was leaving. I shook my head and thanked him for his kindness. I didn't want to delay his work, and I would much rather they catch the killer as soon as possible. Returning to the room, it felt eerier than when I left that morning. On the balcony, the draft seemed to carry the smell of Wayne's blood, corpse, and lingering resentment. It seeped in through my collar and raised goose flesh all over me. The sun didn't reach much into the north-facing room in the afternoon, and I tightened the thin clothes on my body. Early spring temperatures weren't high, and maybe it was just my imagination, but I felt very cold. Right now, I just wanted to leave as quickly as possible. I opened my room door, pulled a suitcase out from under the bed, took out a few clothes, and tossed them onto the bed. I stopped midway to use the bathroom. Among the rush of water, I heard a dissonant note. Click. I know that sound better than anyone. It's the sound of a lock turning. I felt my heart skip a few beats. Every muscle in my body tensed instantly, the fingers that had been fastening my belt frozen in midair, stiff as stone. I'm someone who has the habit of locking the door, but I don't remember whether I deadbolted it when I came in just now. Was it locked after all? The more I try to recall, the more my mind goes blank. I don't even dare breathe. I hold my breath and listen for any sound outside the bathroom. Several seconds passed, and there was no sound at all. Just as I thought I must have heard wrong and was about to breathe a sigh of relief. A faint noise pierced the frozen air around us. Squeak. My heart pounded uncontrollably. The door opened. Someone came in. Every hair on my body stood on end. The person opening the door was carefully holding it so it wouldn't make a sound. I could almost picture them gripping the doorknob with all their strength and easing it open inch by inch. It was definitely not the police. Who is it? A nosy neighbor? Or a murderer? Standing in the cramped bathroom, I was short of breath and my fingers were tingling. What did that person come here for? Retrieving evidence? Or to kill me and silence me? But I really don't know anything at all. Quick, call the police. Yes, call the police quickly. I groped through every pocket on my body, and with a sinking feeling realized my phone had been left outside. What to do now? I couldn't pretend no one was there. The suitcase on the bed, the scattered clothes, the phone in the bedroom, all unmistakably signaled that someone was inside. At that moment, I heard a faint rustling. The tiny grains of sand from the soles of the shoes falling onto the wooden floor. The minute sound made as they rubbed against soft soles. They stopped outside the bathroom door. My heart almost stopped beating. He's waiting for me to come out. I forced myself to stay calm. For now, I had to act as if I knew nothing. If I panicked, I might bring about my own death. I pretended I had just used the toilet, pressed the flush button again, and then summoned all my courage to slowly open the bathroom door. It was very quiet outside, but I could hear it. The warm breath, close enough to touch. He was in the room. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted nothing more than to bolt for the door and run as far as I could, but I couldn't let him suspect anything was wrong. I kept my eyes fixed ahead and groped my way to where my phone lay. My hand brushed it, and my heart sank again. My phone has been taken. Utterly desperate, I steeled myself and went back to the suitcase, itching to shove every piece of clothing in at once and grab the case and run. What on earth does this person want? He's not here to kill me. Otherwise, he would have made a move when I came out of the bathroom just now. I pretended nothing was amiss as I placed the clothes into the suitcase. Soft fibers, an uneven woven texture. It's a thin sweater. The fabric is stiffer, rough to the touch, tightly knitted. I folded the jeans and put them into the suitcase. Smooth linen, soft and comfortable. It's a shirt. I trembled as I folded the clothes, my hand reflexively reaching to the side. A soft, delicate sensation, something warm and plush. It was a human hand. Ah! I shouted, snatching my hand back like lightning. When I reached out again more cautiously, the sensation of a human hand was gone, replaced by something cold and square. My phone. Strange. Was it just my imagination? Still shaken, I knew exactly what had happened, yet I had to pretend to the other person that I knew nothing. I zipped up my suitcase and felt a great weight lift from my chest. Without hesitation, I turned and left. Fear churned inside me like boiling water, and I even hit the door frame as I opened the door. I couldn't pay attention to the pain on my forehead, forcing down the fear inside me. Restraining the urge to run, I dragged my suitcase and left, one step at a time. Only after I had passed through the building's gate and reached the complex's square, when I heard the old men and women from the residence committee playing cards and chatting, did I finally feel a weight lift off me, as if I had crawled out of hell into sunlight, breathing in great gulps of air. In the chill of early spring, my back was, to my surprise, soaked with sweat. It looked like I had to do something. After that shock, I didn't sleep at all that night. When I finally opened my eyes and tossed and turned, the result was that I went to the office the next day with a huge dark circle under my eye. As expected, the company looked calm on the surface, but once the bosses were away, the staff had already exploded into gossip. Did you hear? Wayne was murdered. That news of yours is old. Haven't you heard the latest? The murderer is in our company. The boss is here. Shoo. Keep your voice down. Especially where I sat, the chatter didn't stop. Everyone must have heard about how I ran straight into the killer on my way home. Just after the lunch break ended, an intern came over. Hey, did you really notice nothing at all last night? I forced a wry smile. She still wouldn't let it go. The scent? I've heard that when someone's sight is gone, their other senses grow keener. Could you tell by smell which one of those people it was? Do I look like a dog? Everything is perfectly normal. I was telling the truth. Another woman interjected. I bet you 10 spicy sticks it was Victor. What? Haven't you heard? Last night, Victor and Wayne got into a fight over the new pretty girl in the next apartment, fueled by alcohol. The new art director? Although I had never seen the newcomer they were talking about, from everyone's descriptions, I could picture a striking beauty, a face that could rival a top movie star, the goddess in the eyes of many single men at the company. Programmer is a high-risk profession for being single from birth. Playboys like Wayne are the exception. The moment there was gossip to be had, everyone tacitly stopped what they were doing and gathered around. What? What? An ex-girlfriend? Victor is worshipping the goddess, Wayne sneered. He should take a good look in the mirror. If he had the charm to pull a beauty of that caliber, he wouldn't still be single from birth into his 20s. He even says he's already slept with that little beauty ages ago. Pathetic. Only someone like Victor, unwanted, would fall for this kind of secondhand trash. Who told you that? Charlie. He's been going around the office all morning talking about what happened last night. That guy might be the most laid back of all of them. An older employee spoke with earnest gravity. Seeing that he had drawn everyone's attention, he felt a bit pleased with himself. I have a childhood friend in the police. I asked him about the situation. The police have now ruled out Charlie and Gary. One has a solid alibi. The other was so drunk he couldn't have committed the murder. The young intern considered this thoughtfully. Isn't that just the classic Conan three-way? Jake, Victor, and Dylan. I think it's Jake. Once I happened to glance at his favorites on a video site. All those violent, gory splatter films. People who like that kind of thing are capable of something like this. But Jake doesn't have a motive, does he? A friend in HR told me someone reported that Jake privately abused animals and posted the videos online, which would reflect badly on the company. Jake and Wayne hang out a lot. Could Wayne be the one who reported him? That would give him a motive, wouldn't it? If anyone had the strongest motive to kill, I'd vote for Victor. The guy looks unpleasant and has a violent temper. The more I thought about it on the way back, the angrier I got. It's entirely possible he simply took Wayne out. The older programmer said gravely. Victor claimed that after leaving Wayne's place, he went to an internet cafe to blow off steam playing games. That particular cafe security cameras happened to be down, and no one remembers seeing him there. Having heard he possessed such inside information, the others grew even more animated. What about Jake and Dylan? Do they have an alibi? Well, everyone grew anxious. The smokers offered their good cigarettes. The non-smokers handed over the milk teas that had just arrived. Only then did he finally decide to stop teasing, and he spoke slowly. Jake and Dylan say they walked home together, but there's no third party who can vouch for them. Someone clapped his hands. I've got it. Jake and Dylan are accomplices. Jake and Dylan have always been close, because Dylan has long held a grudge against Wayne. The two of them teamed up to kill Wayne. One struck, the other kept watch. No, I cut him off. There is only one murderer. The others voiced in confusion. How do you know? I put on a mysterious air and said, because last night in the room, besides myself, I only heard one person's breathing. Maybe my words made them imagine that terrifying scenario, standing face to face with a murderer without knowing it, and everyone fell silent. You lot have nothing better to do. The project manager's thunderous roar snapped everyone out of their spine-chilling fantasies, and they hurried back to their desks. After the manager walked away, the whispering started up again. Did that old bald guy eat gunpowder? Why is he so cranky today? Hey, don't even start. I heard his wife almost found out he's been seeing a mistress. He must be raging inside. There's that kind of gossip too? Spill it. A new piece of gossip surfaced. As the tide turned, the focus shifted to someone else. The girl said mysteriously, this matter actually has to be told starting from a mysterious blackmail letter. I already knew what she was going to say and had no interest in listening. So I propped myself up with my white cane and planned to go to the bathroom. The building our company occupies is Tower A, which is under renovation. The restrooms have been shut off, so to use one you have to walk across the sky bridge to Tower B. It wasn't lunch break, so there were hardly any people on the corridor. In the narrow space, my footsteps echoed back and forth between the walls and the ceiling. I kept replaying the information I had just received in my head. Right now, the police's prime suspect had to be Jake, Victor, and Dylan. Which one was it exactly? Contrary to what others guessed, I didn't think Victor had the nerve. He was all bluster and no backbone, seeming hot-tempered, but really just putting on a show. Even if he used the courage lent by alcohol, if he really had the guts to kill someone, he probably wouldn't have the self-control to stay calm. Just like Officer Lynn said, whoever could do something like that must be a meticulous, unflappable fellow. More than that, I had an even more pressing question, just at that moment. An extra set of footsteps echoed down the empty corridor. I quickened my pace, and the footsteps behind me quickened too. I stopped where I was, and the footsteps stopped as well. This time I was sure it wasn't my imagination. There's someone behind me. I couldn't help but grip my cane tighter, summoning my courage to shout. Who is there? The footsteps faded away without a sound. Is that Jake? Or Victor? Or Dylan? Has he come to kill me and silence me? Or is he here again to watch me? Strange footsteps sounded again, growing faster, quickly coming closer to me. I was extremely nervous, gripping the cane with both hands, ready to defend at a moment's notice. The footsteps drew closer and closer. I couldn't hold back a cry, and at the same time, I swung the cane toward the direction in front of me. Don't eat me, it's me. Charlie, who suddenly appeared from the backlit direction, drained me of energy in an instant. My hands went limp, and I let the cane fall. He was one of the first people I met at this company. When I first arrived, I struggled to adapt to being marginalized, and Charlie's penchant for jokes and teasing helped me a lot. I was a little annoyed with him. I just asked you a moment ago. Why didn't you answer me? You were too far away. I couldn't hear what you said. Charlie gave a hee-hee laugh, and then I heard the click of a lighter. He had a solid alibi. The barbecue stall owner and several customers could vouch for him. In other words, I'm safe now. He handed me a lit cigarette, and I instinctively took a drag. Charlie exhaled slowly and said, "Just stepped out for some air and happened to see you up ahead. Gave you quite a scare, didn't it?" I wasn't sure whether he meant just now or last night, but whichever it was, it had indeed startled me. You went back home to have your eyes checked not long ago, didn't you? How did it go? I shook my head and said, "Nothing has changed." Oh, what a cruel fate. It's nothing. I'm used to it. Charlie changed the subject. I didn't expect that yesterday I was still talking to Wayne, and now he's already dead. But those things he said, words are a dangerous thing. He spoke so viciously, you can't really blame others. For what he said, it seemed Charlie had already decided Victor was the killer. I was half convinced, half doubtful. Do people really kill someone just because they insult the person they love? Bah! Charlie spat once, grit his teeth, and said, "Offended is far too mild a word. You weren't there yesterday. You didn't see that bastard Wayne, how vulgar he was, painting in lurid detail how he toyed with that little girl. He got his fun, and then had the nerve to put on a face of disgust. Tell me, what man could stand by and see the goddess in his heart treated like that?" Charlie grew more and more worked up as he spoke, his voice involuntarily rising in pitch. It was clear he had completely identified with Victor. Maybe so. Perhaps dissatisfied with my evasive tone, Charlie asked, "What? You don't think Victor did it?" Trust me, with his impulsive streak, he absolutely could have. I know, but precisely because he's hot-headed and impulsive, even if he killed someone in a fit of emotion, he'd certainly leave a lot of clues. Who can say for sure? Charlie was clearly unconvinced. By the way, they said you heard the killer breathing when you came in? Charlie murmured. I didn't expect a blind man like you to have such good hearing. The voice came from Wayne's bedroom. I thought Wayne had fallen asleep. Thinking back now, it gives me the chills. Tell me about it. Charlie agreed, nodding. If it had been any ordinary person, the killer would have silenced you. Not necessarily, as long as I don't turn on the light. I said it casually, and without any warning, a story I'd heard long ago floated into my mind. What do you mean? Have you heard that creepy, on closer thought, little story? A girl returns to her dorm late at night, and, so as not to wake her roommates, climbs into bed in the dark. When she wakes up, She finds the room full of police. It turns out her roommate had been murdered and dismembered. Written on the wall in blood was a line. "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light last night?" Ugh, how terrifying. Do you think the killer knew about this story too? Deliberately copying it, huh? What a pervert. It's one thing not to get caught for murder, but to write about it and scare other people too. My whole body shivered. I thought of something. Charlie didn't notice my abnormality. He kept smoking and sighing about the fickleness of the world and the bleakness of human nature. I was still trembling from my recent discovery, so I found an excuse to slip away as soon as possible. Before parting, I asked Charlie to grab a drink with me after work tonight. Consider it a farewell for Wayne. Charlie nodded. Consider it a farewell gift for Wayne. I used the excuse of not feeling well and left early. Given what had happened to me, no one said much. In the taxi, I turned over in my mind the discovery I'd just made. The more I pondered it, the more convinced I became. After several minutes of weighing it, I finally made up my mind. Because of the excitement in his heart, his fingers trembled slightly as he dialed the number. With a beep, the call connected. "Hello." Officer Lynn's voice came through on the other end of the line. "It's me." I gave my name, then couldn't wait to say, "I think I know who killed Wayne. Could I have an espresso, please?" We arranged to meet at the cafe. Officer Lynn ordered the same coffee as last time, and I had a latte. I folded and stowed my white cane, then, unable to wait, plunged straight into the matter. "Has the police found anything?" "Still under investigation." Officer Lynn was deliberately vague, which made sense. He certainly wouldn't disclose detailed investigative information to a civilian like me for no reason. From his tone, it seemed they hadn't made any effective progress. "You say you know who the killer is? Have you remembered an important clue?" "Both yes and no. I just suddenly saw through a blind spot that has always existed in our understanding." "What? That's the motive." Officer Lynn knitted his brows slightly. "Motive?" He suddenly understood. "I get it. Perhaps to someone like you who hasn't had professional training, a motive for murder is easy to overlook, but in our eyes as police, that inevitably—" No. I hurriedly shook my head to interrupt him. "I'm not talking about motive for murder. I've read detective novels. I of course know that's basic criminal investigation 101. "Then what do you mean?" Unable to contain my excitement, I lowered my voice. "But it's the motive for writing the blood words." "Blood words?" "Exactly. Think about it. If you are a murderer, no matter what your motive for killing was, the moment after you've killed someone, your heart should be in turmoil, at the very least unsettled. While cleaning the scene, you suddenly hear the doorknob turn. Someone's back. Your heart jumps into your throat. Then you see it's me, a blind man, coming in, and you relax. Because you know I'm blind. As long as you don't make a sound, I won't know what's happened." The cafe waiter brought our coffees, and Officer Lynn also took a few sugar cubes from the small tray on the table. While stirring, he listened to my account with a solemn expression. "Everything happened just as you imagine. I called Wayne a few times, and, when he didn't answer, thought he had fallen asleep and went back to my own room to rest. If you were the killer, after that roller coaster of shock and relief, you'd have breathed a sigh of relief, right? At that moment, you'd be thinking only about cleaning up the scene and leaving as quickly as possible. Just like me packing in the room that day. After escaping with my life, I only wanted to get away, with neither the thought nor the energy for anything extra. But the killer did something unnecessary. He left blood-written characters on the wall. Any sane person would try to leave as soon as possible. But the murderer not only didn't panic, he even had the leisure to leave blood-written characters. It was the psychological motive behind that shift that led me to figure out who the killer is. Officer Lynn, what do you think the killer's purpose was in leaving the blood message? Officer Lynn listened to me calmly. When asked, he replied coolly. To show off, to taunt, to mock, and to instill terror. Obviously, he had already thought this through. So, I believe it must have been Jake. Of the 3 people left, only he has that kind of psychological makeup. First, Jake had motive. I learned that from a colleague. Someone anonymously reported Jake to HR for abusing cats. He was close with Wayne, so it's very possible Wayne was the one who did it. Jake killed Wayne as an act of revenge. Second, Jake is twisted in his tastes. He likes watching extreme gore films and privately tortures cats to vent. A pervert. If it had been Victor or Dylan, once they realized I hadn't found them at the crime scene, they'd have been terrified, cleaned up the scene, and fled. Only someone mentally warped like Jake would do something like write on the wall with a dead man's blood. Yes, that's the analysis I gave Officer Lynn. I have been pondering the motive behind the killer's unnecessary act of leaving blood-written words on the wall. I continued. From this action, it's not hard to conclude that the killer is a psychopath. So all we need to do is identify the psychopath among the remaining 3 people, right? Officer Lynn listened quietly to my analysis, but he wasn't as excited as I was. He let out a soft sigh. You need evidence to arrest someone. All those things you just said are guesses. Do you have any concrete proof? I was a little stunned. Jake abused a cat. Isn't that proof that he's mentally disturbed? Officer Lynn began to correct me. First, the report you mentioned about Jake abusing animals. We did learn about that during our visits, but there's no evidence proving Jake actually did such things. Second, even if the animal abuse were confirmed, that doesn't mean his psychological issues are as severe as you described. Moreover, even if he does have serious mental problems, that doesn't mean he killed Wayne. Officer Lynn's tightly linked reasoning left me dumbfounded, but I still wanted to defend my findings a little, so I steered the topic back toward the bloodletter motive theory. But if you analyze the motive for why the killer left the blood writing, doesn't it indeed point only to Jake? Can't that alone confirm Jake is the murderer? If we ignore the other evidence and look only at the blood-written words, Jake is indeed the prime suspect. But it's also possible. What? It might be that you've picked the wrong motive. You mean to say the killer might not have been driven by some perverse impulse when they used Wayne's blood to write those words? Officer Lynn took out paper and a pen. I heard the scratch of the ballpoint across the coarse sheet. Your reasoning isn't wrong. The more a killer does at a crime scene, the more traces he may leave. Going to the trouble of writing a blood message under the living room wall must have had a reason. What was the purpose of the killer leaving that blood writing? The first possibility, which we just discussed, is that he wanted to show off, to make you feel afraid. Any other possibilities? From his tone, I knew he had thought of another possibility. I strained to picture the moments from the crime to the discovery of the body, and suddenly it clicked. Is it possible that the actual content of the blood-written characters doesn't matter, but the fact that they're written in blood is what matters? Exactly. It seemed what I had thought was exactly what Officer Lynn wanted to say. He wrote down this possibility on the paper as he spoke. Do you remember the delivery guy who reported it? He didn't call the police because he found a body in the room. He called because he saw the bloody red characters on the wall. Suppose that line of writing hadn't been there. What do you think would have happened? The delivery guy wouldn't have noticed anything at first. He would have had to walk into Wayne's room to see the corpse. It's also possible he wouldn't have gone in at all. Maybe he would have opened the door, glanced inside, seen nobody, and walked away. Exactly. The delivery guy's appearance was an accident. Let's put that aside for now. If Wayne's girlfriend hadn't thought to have him check that morning, when do you think Wayne's body would have been discovered? It was a Friday. His phone was dead and switched off. When I called him at home, he didn't answer. She might have assumed he'd gone out partying before I woke up, which fit Wayne's usual pattern. Maybe no one will notice something's wrong until work starts next Monday. Officer Lynn said, therefore, the second possibility is that the killer wanted the body to be found immediately. I pondered for a moment, but there are doubts about that explanation. Go on. According to your account, the killer wouldn't have expected Wayne's long-distance girlfriend to have the delivery guy come check the place the next morning. Without that episode, if he really wanted the body found quickly, leaving blood words would be pointless. Besides, I can't even see them. If it weren't for that unlucky delivery guy, what would have actually happened is that I would have gotten up as usual and gone about my business. Whether or not a blood message was left made no difference. If the killer wanted a blind man to be the first to find the body, they'd have taken other measures. Officer Lynn agreed with my assessment. That makes sense, but it's also possible the killer had already planned for the body to be discovered the next morning. For example, concocting an excuse to visit, something like that. The delivery guy's appearance just happened to play into his plan. After saying that, He himself noticed how strange this theory sounded. If the killer really had arranged for that, say, using the pretext of visiting Wayne, why bother leaving a message on the wall? Just taking a few more steps would reveal the body. It's only a matter of a few minutes, earlier or later. It seems the second possibility can be ruled out, I said. Yes. After speaking, the two of us fell into a long silence, both stumped by the riddle. Suddenly, Officer Lin slapped his hand, as if waking from a dream. What is it? I was startled. So that's it. I understand. Excitement laced the young officer's voice. You've solved the mystery? It was just a hunch, but my instinct tells me I was right this time. I need to go back to my team now. We're gathering evidence and investigating the suspect. I can't tell you much, but I have to thank you. Your line of thinking gave me a huge insight. Officer Lin hadn't even finished his coffee before he hurried off. The next time I saw him was the following afternoon in an interrogation room at the police station. He brought me two pieces of news, each one more shocking than the last. First, the one who killed Wayne was Charlie. Second, Charlie died last night. Charlie died. I was utterly stunned, my mind in complete chaos. When several police officers showed up at the company and said they needed my help with the investigation, I assumed they had caught Wayne's real killer. I never expected to be hit with news like this. In the interrogation room, Officer Lin sat opposite me, and another policeman sat beside him. How did he die? I asked. Officer Lin said, carbon monoxide poisoning. Was it an accident or... Officer Lin didn't answer my question. His voice sounded the same as the previous times, calm, without a ripple. The coroner estimates that Charlie died sometime between 1 and 3 a.m. last night. Cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning. We found the gas valve in the kitchen turned on. Traces of sleeping medication were detected in Charlie's system. From the timeline investigation, we found you were the last person to see Charlie alive. Me? I remembered the line Charlie said when he was smoking. Yesterday, I was still talking to Wayne, and now he's already a dead man. At this moment, I felt the same. Last night, I was still drinking with Charlie, and today we're separated by life and death. Officer Lin tapped the table with his pen cap and said, Start from your meeting last night. What time? Around 7 p.m.? Maybe a bit later. I can't remember exactly. It was at a barbecue place near the company. They should have transaction records with the precise time. What did you talk about? I tried hard to recall. They were all very ordinary topics. Be more specific. We were mainly reminiscing about and complaining about Wayne. After all, the main reason we met for drinks last night was to send him off. We talked about some things that happened at the company, and that was about it. Since we're talking about Wayne's death, did you share your analysis of the case with Charlie? Officer Lin asked. What do you mean? For example, the things you told me yesterday afternoon. The officer prompted. I suddenly realized, nodding repeatedly. I figured that since Charlie has a solid alibi, like me, he's just an innocent person dragged into this. Talking to him about it shouldn't be a problem. What exactly did you say? The officer pressed. Pretty much the same thing I told you yesterday. I told him my whole theory that Jake is the real killer and that you disagreed. I also said that you and Officer Lin together had ruled out the second possibility. Oh, right. I remembered. I also told Charlie that Wayne would be able to rest soon. He asked me what I meant, and I told him, Officer Lin, you've already got a lead. It shouldn't be long before you catch the real killer. Officer Lin exchanged a look with the officers beside him, then lowered his voice to confirm with me. Are you sure you said that to him? I nodded emphatically. Did Charlie react strangely at the time? I scratched my face and adjusted my sunglasses. He paused for a long time, then said, Oh, I see. That's good. I found it odd. His reaction was too flat. Shouldn't he have been happy to have caught the real culprit? We talked a little longer, and before long Charlie said he was a bit sleepy and wanted to go home to rest, so we paid and went our separate ways. What time did you leave? Around 9 o'clock. May I ask, does this have anything to do with Charlie's death? I heard the two policemen opposite whispering. A minute later, Officer Lin said to me, We have ample reason to suspect that Charlie, knowing his crimes were about to be exposed, took his own life out of fear of punishment. But doesn't Charlie have a solid alibi? Wayne's time of death was around 11:20 p.m. At that time, Charlie was at a street-side barbecue stall, eating, and didn't leave until nearly midnight. The stall owner and several customers remembered him. Could those people have been lying? No, we investigated. Charlie's alibi witnesses didn't know him beforehand. Their testimony is reliable. What exactly happened? You have to ask yourself one question first. Why do you think Wayne was killed around 11:20? What else could it be? Wasn't that what the forensics found? Officer Lynn shook his head. No, the coroner only estimated that Wayne died between 11 and 1. I froze, then snapped back to reality, because I got home at around 11:20. Exactly, and at that time the killer was at the scene, so we made that reasonable inference. Now the question is, how can we know the killer was at the crime scene at that time? Because of the blood-written words on the wall. Lucky I'm blind, right? Goosebumps crawled up my arms, but this time for a completely different reason. Anyone seeing that phrase at first glance would assume that when I came home the killer was in the room, and only because I'm blind and didn't know what had happened did he spare me. However, that was only the killer's misdirection, to mislead people into thinking the attack happened around 11:20, to make them believe that, at the very least, he was already in the room before 11:20. But in reality, it's very possible that when I came home, the killer hadn't actually struck yet. As for why the killer would do that, I murmured to myself, because he had a solid alibi up until midnight. Officer Lynn flipped through the transcript and said, "When we took your statement earlier, you said you received a colleague's call before falling asleep. According to the call log, the incoming call was at 11:36 p.m. The person who called you was Charlie, right?" "That's right." I recalled the scene at the time. Charlie called, and the first thing he asked was whether I had gotten home. Then he said there seemed to be some documents left at Wayne's place, and asked if Wayne was still awake. I told him Wayne had already gone to bed before I got home, and to bring it up tomorrow, if there was anything. Officer Lynn said to me, "Let's go over it from the beginning." At 8 p.m., Wayne invited 5 colleagues, Charlie, Jake, and others, to his home for drinks. On the way, Wayne and Victor had a verbal altercation. According to the recollections of others present, after having a huge argument with Victor, Wayne was in a foul mood, drank a lot, and finally, using the excuse, "Let's call a night, I'm drunk and sleepy," sent the 5 people away and ended the gathering early. The 5 left the apartment at 10:30. We don't know exactly when Charlie decided to kill Wayne. The only thing we can be sure of is that it was after 10:30. Why? Because it ended earlier than usual. When you went home, you didn't run into them. That's right. The past few times, I always left at around 11, and on my way home would just catch them packing up, getting ready to leave. As for whether Charlie had planned it and then decided to go to the barbecue stall to give himself an alibi, or whether he thought up the plan on the spot while at the stall, he's dead now, and we can't know. But that doesn't matter. At some point between 10:30 and 11:20, Charlie decided to use this abruptly ended, prematurely finished gathering to kill Wayne. He knew your habits, knew you'd probably get home around 11:20, but he couldn't be sure you'd go straight to your room to rest after getting home. If he talked to Wayne and discovered Wayne was still alive then, his plan would be ruined. So, at 11:36, he made up an excuse to call you, to test whether you'd had contact with Wayne. Once he learned you had gone straight home, he decided to act. He left the barbecue stall close to midnight, used the spare key under the carpet to open the door, killed Wayne, and cleaned up the scene. Then he wrote a blood message on the living room wall to create the illusion that the murderer had been there at around 11:20. I listened to Officer Lynn in stunned silence. I couldn't imagine that just the other side of the wall from the room where I had been sleeping, someone had carried out such a cold, brutal plot. But what about the motive? Why would Charlie kill Wayne? They had no grudge. As I spoke, my voice dropped, and in my mind Charlie's face flashed, furious, indignant. Which man could stand by while his goddess is insulted like that? Her mouth is so poisonous, no wonder people react. At the time I thought he was just standing up for Victor, but it turned out he was taking the chance to voice his own feelings. Officer Lynn continued, as it turned out afterward, just as Charlie had planned. Because of that bloody written message, we moved Wayne's time of death forward to between 11 o'clock and 11:30, and he had a solid alibi, so he was cleared of suspicion. But he hadn't expected that you would, by accident, give us a clue. Why did the killer leave a blood-written message? Although the conclusion you reached was wrong, your starting point was not. It was precisely your hint that allowed us to follow the thread. After learning from your words that the police had begun to suspect the killer's motive for writing the blood message, Charlie realized he was about to be exposed. He took sleeping pills, opened the gas valve, and killed himself out of guilt. I remembered the line Charlie said when he was smoking, "Yesterday, I was still talking to Wayne, and now he's already a dead man." At this moment, I felt the same. Last night, I was still drinking with Charlie, and today we're separated by life and death. Officer Lin tapped the table with his pen cap and said, "Start from your meeting last night." "What time?" "Around 7 p.m., maybe a bit later. I can't remember exactly. It was at a barbecue place near the company. They should have transaction records with the precise time." "What did you talk about?" I tried hard to recall. They were all very ordinary topics. "Be more specific." "We were mainly reminiscing about and complaining about Wayne. After all, the main reason we met for drinks last night was to send him off. We talked about some things that happened at the company, and that was about it." "Since we're talking about Wayne's death, did you share your analysis of the case with Charlie?" Officer Lin asked. "What do you mean?" "For example, the things you told me yesterday afternoon." The officer prompted. I suddenly realized, nodding repeatedly. I figured that since Charlie has a solid alibi, like me, he's just an innocent person dragged into this. Talking to him about it shouldn't be a problem." "What exactly did you say?" the officer pressed. "Pretty much the same thing I told you yesterday. I told him my whole theory that Jake is the real killer and that you disagreed. I also said that you and Officer Lin together had ruled out the second possibility." "Oh, right. I remembered. I also told Charlie that Wayne would be able to rest soon. He asked me what I meant, and I told him, Officer Lin, you've already got a lead. It shouldn't be long before you catch the real killer." Officer Lin exchanged a look with the officers beside him, then lowered his voice to confirm with me. "Are you sure you said that to him?" I nodded emphatically. "Did Charlie react strangely at the time?" I scratched my face and adjusted my sunglasses. He paused for a long time, then said, "Oh, I see. That's good." I found it odd. His reaction was too flat. Shouldn't he have been happy to have caught the real culprit? We talked a little longer, and before long Charlie said he was a bit sleepy and wanted to go home to rest, so we paid and went our separate ways. "What time did you leave?" "Around 9 o'clock. May I ask, does this have anything to do with Charlie's death?" I heard the two policemen opposite whispering. A minute later, Officer Lin said to me, "We have ample reason to suspect that Charlie, knowing his crimes were about to be exposed, took his own life out of fear of punishment. But doesn't Charlie have a solid alibi?" Wayne's time of death was around 11:20 p.m. At that time, Charlie was at a street-side barbecue stall, eating, and didn't leave until nearly midnight. The stall owner and several customers remembered him. Could those people have been lying? No, we investigated. Charlie's alibi witnesses didn't know him beforehand. Their testimony is reliable. What exactly happened? You have to ask yourself one question first. Why do you think Wayne was killed around 11:20? What else could it be? Wasn't that what the forensics found? Officer Lin shook his head. No, the coroner only estimated that Wayne died between 11 and 1. I froze, then snapped back to reality, because I got home at around 11:20. Exactly, and at that time the killer was at the scene, so we made that reasonable inference. Now the question is, how can we know the killer was at the crime scene at that time? Because of the blood-written words on the wall. Lucky I'm blind, right? Goosebumps crawled up my arms, but this time for a completely different reason. Anyone seeing that phrase at first glance would assume that when I came home the killer was in the room, and only because I'm blind and didn't know what had happened did he spare me. However, that was only the killer's misdirection, to mislead people into thinking the attack happened around 11:20. To make them believe that, at the very least, he was already in the room before 11:20. But in reality, it's very possible that when I came home, the killer hadn't actually struck yet. As for why the killer would do that, I murmured to myself, because he had a solid alibi up until midnight. Officer Lin flipped through the transcript and said, "When we took your statement earlier, you said you received a colleague's call before falling asleep. According to the call log, the incoming call was at 11:36 p.m. The person who called you was Charlie, right? That's right. I recalled the scene at the time. Charlie called, and the first thing he asked was whether I had gotten home. Then he said there seemed to be some documents left at Wayne's place, and asked if Wayne was still awake. I told him Wayne had already gone to bed before I got home, and to bring it up tomorrow, if there was anything. Officer Lynn said to me, "Let's go over it from the beginning." At 8 p.m., Wayne invited 5 colleagues, Charlie, Jake, and others, to his home for drinks. On the way, Wayne and Victor had a verbal altercation. According to the recollections of others present, after having a huge argument with Victor, Wayne was in a foul mood, drank a lot, and finally, using the excuse, "Let's call a night, I'm drunk and sleepy," sent the 5 people away and ended the gathering early. The 5 left the apartment at 10:30. We don't know exactly when Charlie decided to kill Wayne. The only thing we can be sure of is that it was after 10:30. Why? Because it ended earlier than usual. When you went home, you didn't run into them. That's right. The past few times, I always left at around 11, and on my way home would just catch them packing up, getting ready to leave. As for whether Charlie had planned it and then decided to go to the barbecue stall to give himself an alibi, or whether he thought up the plan on the spot while at the stall, he's dead now, and we can't know. But that doesn't matter. At some point between 10:30 and 11:20, Charlie decided to use this abruptly ended, prematurely finished gathering to kill Wayne. He knew your habits, knew you'd probably get home around 11:20, but he couldn't be sure you'd go straight to your room to rest after getting home. If he talked to Wayne and discovered Wayne was still alive then, his plan would be ruined. So, at 11:36, he made up an excuse to call you, to test whether you'd had contact with Wayne. Once he learned you had gone straight home, he decided to act. He left the barbecue stall close to midnight, used the spare key under the carpet to open the door, killed Wayne, and cleaned up the scene. Then he wrote a blood message on the living room wall to create the illusion that the murderer had been there at around 11:20. I listened to Officer Lynn in stunned silence. I couldn't imagine that just the other side of the wall from the room where I had been sleeping, someone had carried out such a cold, brutal plot. But what about the motive? Why would Charlie kill Wayne? They had no grudge. As I spoke, my voice dropped, and in my mind Charlie's face flashed, furious, indignant. Which man could stand by while his goddess is insulted like that? Her mouth is so poisonous, no wonder people react. At the time I thought he was just standing up for Victor, but it turned out he was taking the chance to voice his own feelings. Officer Lynn continued, as it turned out afterward, just as Charlie had planned. Because of that bloody written message, we moved Wayne's time of death forward to between 11 o'clock and 11:30, and he had a solid alibi, so he was cleared of suspicion. But he hadn't expected that you would, by accident, give us a clue. Why did the killer leave a blood-written message? Although the conclusion you reached was wrong, your starting point was not. It was precisely your hint that allowed us to follow the thread. After learning from your words that the police had begun to suspect the killer's motive for writing the blood message, Charlie realized he was about to be exposed. He took sleeping pills, opened the gas valve, and killed himself out of guilt. With conveniences like that, you can see now why I had to pretend to be blind, right? In the middle of the night, I slipped into Charlie's house while he slept, turned on the gas valve, and hid the extortion letter along with some of the proof of stolen goods in his home. When Charlie quietly passed away in his sleep, the heavy burden that had tied me to the extortion scheme vanished with him. Now I can take the remaining jewels and start over in a place where no one knows me. Once again, using the cover of light, I slip back into the darkness. Who says blindness is bad? Blindness is absolutely wonderful. After the case was wrapped up, I resigned from the company citing psychological trauma. Unexpectedly, beyond the standard severance, I also received an extra sum as humanitarian compensation, a pleasant surprise. Officer Lynn, having seen through the murderer's feigned confusion, was promoted not long after joining the team. When he learned I was moving back to my hometown for treatment for my eyes, he specifically asked me out to say goodbye. We met at a cafe as before. After the small talk and taking our seats, Officer Lynn said to me warmly, "This case would never have been solved without you." Not at all. I'm just a clumsy detective who picked the wrong suspect, and felt proud about it. It's all thanks to Officer Lin. If it had been someone else, I might have led them down the wrong path. We both laughed heartily, and Officer Lin placed the farewell gift he'd prepared for me into my hands. A small gift, not much to show my respect. Officer Lin, you're far too courteous. I couldn't refuse, so I had to accept. At that moment, Officer Lin's phone rang. Sorry, it's something about the squad. He stepped outside the cafe to take the call. Just then the waiter came to take our order. Seeing he'd be a while, I took the liberty of ordering the espresso he had chosen the last 2 times. A few minutes later, Officer Lin returned. Having trouble at work. Yeah, big case. Officer Lin, you're so young and yet so excellent. I believe no mystery could stump you. He gave a wry smile. Don't say another word. About Charlie's case, there are still some things I haven't figured out. I grew tense. What things? Sleeping pills. Charlie's system tested positive for sleeping pill compounds, but no pill bottle or box was found at the house, and we checked the trash. So where did Charlie get the pills? The corner of his eye twitched guiltily, luckily hidden by his sunglasses. You think Wayne wasn't killed by Charlie? No. Charlie is the murderer, whether by the bloodletter motive theory, the motive for killing, or the physical evidence. All point to him. I don't doubt that. Then since Charlie killed Wayne, the small question of where the sleeping pills came from doesn't matter, right? No, it's very important. The young officer's righteous, stern voice made my heart sink. He continued, even if Charlie is the murderer, that doesn't mean he committed suicide. Don't forget, there's also an extortion case tied to him. Strangely, aside from those 2 ransom letters and the 2 necklaces, nothing else was found in the extortion case. I kept calm. My voice did not tremble. What exactly are you agonizing over? Aren't these 2 pieces of evidence enough? The waiter brought our coffee. Officer Lin rubbed his brow and said to the waiter, please bring me 2 packets of sugar. I had my mind fixed on the earlier conversation and interjected, no need. I already ordered it with sugar for you. Oh, thank you. Were we just now? Right, I just feel that compared to what was found in Wayne's death case, there was too little in the extortion case. I was wondering if someone else might have taken advantage of Charlie's death. Is there any evidence that Charlie didn't kill himself? Not yet. I've gone over the file again and again these past few days, but I still can't convince myself to get past the origin of the sleeping pills. I see. You suspect Charlie was murdered, and that whoever killed him is the real perpetrator behind the extortion. I didn't hesitate to call it out directly. It seemed the best way both to clear myself and to quiet his doubts. Sure enough, having been spoken to so plainly, Officer Lin fell into silence. After a long while, he lifted his head. Have I been too fanciful? Starting with a few sleeping pills and then overturning cases that were already closed? That does sound a bit much. We both laughed together again. It's been pleasant talking with you. Same here. We talked about other things again, and were surprised to find we had many common interests. I thought we could have become good friends. At the end, as we were about to part, we stood up and put on our coats. Officer Lin took a long stride and handed the cane into my hand, smiling as he said, thank you, for both the inspiration and for ordering my coffee. No problem, it was nothing, he said casually. By the way, how did you know I like my espresso with sugar? A smile hung on both our faces. I heard you order it. No, I didn't. What? I didn't order a sweetened espresso. Officer Lin was still smiling, but the smile on his face was slowly cooling. I recalled the scenes from the 2 previous times. He wasn't wrong. He hadn't clicked. At the very least, he hadn't said it aloud. Then why did I know he liked sugar? Because I saw it. I saw him every time pick up 2 sugar cubes, drop them into the cup, stir, let them dissolve. My subconscious registered the impression. Officer Lin likes his espresso with sugar. When I placed his order a moment ago and saw there were no sugar packets on the table, I blurted it out without thinking. A double espresso with sugar. I'll ask you once more. How did you know? If it wasn't from me. Officer Lin's unruffled voice made me feel as if I'd fallen into an ice pit. Did you see that? Terrible. My heart nearly stopped. Cold sweat crawled up my spine, prickling like needles. Across from his sunglasses, Officer Lin stared at me with piercing eyes, unmoving his expression severe. Those newly restored eyes saw everything clearly. His gaze was growing ever colder, like the winter that had just passed. In the chill of early spring, my clothes were damp once more with cold sweat.